Blackstone Library, specifically Jenna Anthony, for supporting us and for recording this and putting it on YouTube afterwards. So if anybody is interested in other Branford Forum presentations, go on YouTube, search it for Branford Forum, and I think you'll come up with some really interesting stuff. So, no questions yet. Oops. Can everybody see this, my screen here? So as I mentioned, today's presentation is about the Branford Clean Energy Campaign. It's supported in all kinds of different ways by the Branford Clean Energy Committee, People's Action for Clean Energy, the HeatSmart Branford Committee, as well as the town of Branford. So the Clean Energy Committee chairperson is Shirley McCarthy. The HeatSmart coach is Mike Cohen, who will be presenting today. And our first speaker, as well as first selectman, is Jamie Cosgrove. So thank you, Jamie. It's a pleasure to work with you, and we're honored that you could come and join us today.
Great, thanks, Dan. It's a pleasure to be here. I guess we'll get right into it. Are you ready to go? As mentioned, I'm Jamie Cosgrove, the first selectman for the town of Branford. I know the committee, there's several speakers, so I'll move quickly in my remarks, but welcome any questions at the end. So the focus of today is the Branford Clean Energy Campaign that is being led by, as we said, there's different stakeholders involved, but the Branford Clean Energy Committee, which is an ad hoc committee created by the Board of Selectmen a little over a year ago. I just want to first touch upon, when I first got involved and first decided to run for this position that I currently am in, First Selectman, in why I wanted to run. I wanted Branford to continue to provide the programs and services that we offer, to be the town that I grew up in, and be a town that I'd be proud to have my children, to raise them here, and hopefully they would want to stay here as well. And what makes Branford a special place is, I think, the programs, the services that we offer, but it's a community that is open to, it's a very diverse community, and I think that there's a lot of diversity here. That's our strength, right? And primarily that's possible because of a relatively low tax rate compared to other municipalities. It is like I said, it's a financially sound community. And so how are we able to maintain that? And that was really a focus of why I wanted to be actively involved with the town of Branford. And, shortly after, when I realized what I'm really speaking of is the sustainability, right? The term sustainable community, sustainability gets used quite a bit. And it's very broad in terms of what that can mean, various areas from financial sustainability, business sustainability, energy. We know Branford is a shoreline community, so the coastal resiliency is all part of creating a sustainable community. So you can go on to the next thing. So thank you, Dan. Sorry about that. And in doing that, as I mentioned, the Board of Selectmen created a Clean Energy Committee, and which is now moving along with a Clean Energy Campaign. And the focus of this campaign, which they're going to get into the details, the committee members will get into the details, but I think is really in line with what we were doing as a municipality, which we're looking at, any measure that we move forward with. I always say there's three things. We look at the operational benefit, the financial benefit, and then the environmental benefit to it before making a decision moving forward with something. So like I said, the town of Branford, actually, Dan, can you go to the next slide? Because I think that's important to just show some of the, here's the committee. Again, Greg Ames, Bob Babcock, Elena Cahill, Marshall Cox, Joe Gordon, Bill Horn, Sharon Hutner, John Prinz, Eunice Mailer, Dan Rabin, Diana McCarthy-Berkery, who is Sustainable Compliance Manager. This is a committee that, like I said, volunteer committee. Diana is our Sustainability and Compliance Manager. She actually is that's a town position. Dan, next screen, please. Dan, would you mind going, yeah, next slide? This is what I just really want to touch upon quickly. If you look at the first few bullet points, the Tabor Solar Farm, the ESG Honeywell project, which is a energy performance contract, you know, some of the other things, the Coastal Resiliency Fund, the Coastal Vulnerability Ad Hoc Working Group Committee, and then, as I mentioned, the Sustainability Officer position. These were all things that, you know, accomplishments that the town had moved forward with, and there's others as well. But in doing that, and I said as a parallel path was the creation of the Clean Energy Committee, and that came out of discussion and interest from a number of residents. The town formally had a clean energy task force that was established to meet the state's 2010 goals. That committee kind of by and large disbanded after 2010 kind of came and went, the committee was no longer focused on a specific goal. As many of you know, the state has created clean energy goals, clean energy initiatives, and goals to reduce the carbon footprint by 2040. As I mentioned, there's committee individuals, residents in town interested in this area, wanted to see what the town was doing. I had touched upon that there was some initiatives that we were doing, and internally within town, myself and other staff members were saying, okay, well, how do we look at other areas to move forward on? There's so many opportunities. As I said, sustainability is a very broad term. We then had a vacancy, a position that oversaw our solid waste and recycling program. And that's what led to the creation of a sustainability and compliance manager. This position, which is Diane McCarthy-Berkery, came on this past July. She oversees not only the solid waste and recycling, but we've expanded that to really meet the needs of the community, to look at, you know, energy efficiency projects, you know, other measures, and just land conservation, but also she's got a construction background and looking at, you know, sustainable measures for the building, our buildings. So those were things that we were doing. And then, you know, as I said, okay, where do we go to next? What should we focus on? This is such a broad topic. The creation of the Clean Energy Committee, we could then look at areas and potential opportunities for the town to focus on. And you know, with that, you could see that they touched upon and have some accomplishments over the past year with the Branford Energy Plan. Now that was a plan that was drafted. It's available on our town website. Welcome for comments. To be clear, that is a very fluid document. It's meant to be a live document. It's nothing that's necessarily a mandate, but it's not only if the municipality, but really the town as a whole truly wanted to accomplish and meet those goals. How is that attainable? And certainly technology is going to change. Different things that are, you know, not available now and maybe not, you know, thought of or perhaps aren't as efficient as right now, but however, over time, they will be. And it's kind of laying out a path to get there. There's nothing in that plan that's necessarily a mandate, but it's just showing how it is achievable. The Connecticut Green Bank, the Clean Energy Committee has been working with them to evaluate town buildings and see if there's potential to participate in the solar map program, which is a program open to municipalities to introduce solar on the buildings. They evaluated our town as well as our school buildings. They have 3 projects that are feasible, which are three of the elementary schools. At this time, I believe the Board of Ed had voted to proceed with a letter of intent on those projects and further explore them, and that's going through the process right now. The transportation, the transition to EVs for the town fleet. This is something that, that we have some vehicles. We don't see it happening rapidly where our trucks and our fire trucks and police vehicles right away will be a rapid transition. However, you have to take that first step, right? We said, if the technology is there, if it's efficient, if there's a cost benefit, and all these things we evaluate to take a look at. And we do feel that there's opportunity with our town fleet, particularly, the town hall fleet, which is used by various departments in town hall, and perhaps progress into the medical transport and other opportunities. But you have to take that first step, evaluate it, and move forward. And that's what the committee's been working on. And in the budget this year, we do have the purchase of charging stations, as well as a couple vehicles put into that program. So it's all about taking that first step to truly progress. Again, to meet that goal of being a sustainable community, a community that Branford is a community that, many of us are proud to have called home for, if not all our lives, for several years, or for those who are new here, find out why it's a great community to be in. And again, sustainable doesn't mean status quo, right? Where there's things that, we want to see, but we understand you need to progress in certain areas. It's going to create, there's need for change in certain areas to truly, maintain the character and the qualities that we are so proud of to have. And then finally, the PACE HeatSmart grant. The committee had met with PACE to talk about different programs that they work on the energy plan. They provided some input on that and some information. And then from that, the relationship, PACE was looking into providing a HeatSmart grant, which was a grant that's, I don't think it has, this is maybe the first that was in the state of Connecticut. It's been, there's a similar program in neighboring states throughout New England. And this is, which we were awarded a $5,000 grant to initiate a public outreach program to educate people on the HeatSmart, the heat pump program, our opportunities, technology. And that's one thing I just really want to quickly, the work of the Clean Energy Committee is not only to really make recommendations, but it's really to provide outreach and information to the residents and the businesses within the town, because I recognize that, there's probably a lot of information out there that people aren't aware of, and or how to go about it. And it's forums like this that allow the committee to do the outreach and really educate the residents and the businesses on the opportunities that do exist, so they can do their own analysis, whether there's a financial benefit, operational benefit, and as well as the potential environmental benefit from these initiatives. I know that was a lot, but there's a lot to get through, so I'll now turn it back over to Dan. Thanks. Actually, Greg Ames, who worked as the whole committee on the Branford Energy Plan. However, he's, I would say, the point person on the committee. And Greg is a architect here, and he lives here in town of Branford. And Greg, you want to get right into it?
Can do. My job today, folks, is to give you a quick look at Branford's energy plan. When the committee was first formed, we obviously knew right away that step one was to figure out what we had to do. We needed a plan to guide our activities, our actions. So we needed to answer questions like, what do we need to do? What has to happen? How can we make it happen? It was apparent from the start that, as the first selectman said, we wanted to align our goals with the state of Connecticut, 100% clean energy by 2040, reduce the greenhouse gas emissions to 80% below 2001 by 2050, and to focus on energy, on electrification of our energy, and on renewable power sources. So we went to see what's the path to addressing our energy problem. The plan looked at where we are, how we use energy, determined what we need to do. There's a lot of specific quantified steps in the plan. Today's not the forum to go into that, but I really hope you folks will go get online, go to this town website and check out the plan. There's some fun stuff and good information in there. The plan includes all energy production in the town, buildings, transportation. Doing the plan, we discovered some really fun stuff that I'd like to share with you. For instance, the plan that we're proposing is not gonna create limits or burdens on our lives. It's going to give us savings. It's going to improve things. And that's a really exciting aspect that we discovered as we got into this. What else do we learn? Several things. We learned we can use this plan to monitor, measure our progress to see if we're getting where we need to go. We learned we need to, what I say, get the plan out there. Sorry, folks, that was my telephone. Get the plan out there to share it with everybody, because what the town does in the municipal buildings, in our town vehicles, in the school buildings, is only 5% of the energy that's used in the communities. So if this is going to be successful, if we're all going to get where we need to go, it has to be something that we all join in on. So our job, we see, not as just taking care of the town stuff, but as bringing this knowledge and these ideas to the whole community. We also learned that energy technology and economics, as Jamie said, are changing rapidly. Do people know now that renewables are beginning to have a competitive economic edge over fossil fuels? And suddenly all electric homes in all but the northernmost portions of our country are less expensive than conventional homes? So when you see this happening, you know that the plan must change too. As the economics and the technology change, the plan needs to be updated. And that's why Jamie advised us that it needs to be what we call a living document. To make that happen, we need your help. And we'll talk about that before I sign off. One exciting thing we learned is that people are on board. The receptivity and the enthusiasm that we're finding in the community is really stirring and exciting. It really leads us to feel confident. We can do this. We can make it happen. So, plan's complete as it stands, ready to be evolved. It's on the town website. The citation is here on the slide. It's actually an easy, fun read, so please look at it. We need you to share your thoughts with us. We need you to help us make the plan better and evolve it as time goes by. Thanks very much for listening. The next participant is going to be Joe Roy, who's going to talk about home energy solutions. It's all yours, Joe.
Okay, thank you, Greg. So HeatSmart's goal is to promote clean energy while saving homeowners money by investing in clean, efficient heat pump energy systems and solar. By participating in the HeatSmart program, you can not only save money while reducing the use of fossil fuels, but you can also save CO2 emissions for all residents here in Branford. Next slide. So the HeatSmart program is broken down into 4 potential steps, with each step digging deeper and deeper into energy and CO2 savings. I will be discussing the first 2 steps. The Home Energy Solutions, or HES program, is step 1, This program is administered by the Connecticut utilities using ratepayer funds that are collected on customer energy bills. The current copay for that service is $0. So it's currently at no cost, which is the lowest it's ever been. The work that comes with that service is around $1,400 worth of work per home. This offer is good for customers who sign up by the end of the year, though we are hearing some talks, and we're hopeful that that'll be pushed out until March 31st of 2021. Step 2 is the deeper energy efficiency improvements, which are identified during the HES audit. Associated rebates for some measures pick up most to sometimes even all of the cost, and we'll use insulation as an example. Next slide. So again, I work for a company called CMC Energy Services. We are a woman-owned and operated company that's been in business for 43 years. We are one of the 2 selected vendors to complete the HES audits on behalf of the Branford HeatSmart campaign. Next slide. So I wanted to review what was included in the HES program. Essentially, you'll have a team of 2 technicians at your house for the entire day. So if you go to the next task, Dan. So the first step in the process is scheduling the assessment, where you'll talk to one of our CSRs who will explain the program, ask you questions about your home regarding age, size, and type. We'll also ask about virtual pre-assessments. That's an option right now during COVID, or if there's a longer wait to get the HES assessment done, it's a good first step to learn a little bit more about your house and to save you some energy saving measures, including LED lights and energy power strips. When the technicians get to your home, again, there'll be a team of 2 technicians. They'll explain the program to you, and they'll walk around your house, and they'll identify all of the opportunities. Next task. When they're walking around your home, they're going to look for health and safety, meaning they're going to do what we call CAS testing. So they look at your gas lines. They want to ensure there's no gas leaks. They look at your furnace, boiler, hot water heater. They test it to ensure that there's no backdrafting, because when we go to seal up the home, we want to make sure that the house is healthy before doing so. And then the next step is they're going to identify any incandescent light bulbs and change those out with LEDs. You get up to 25 with the service. They're also going to be looking at water conservation measures, including aerators, shower heads, pipe wrap as well. And then the next step is the actual on-the-spot improvements. So this is what takes most of the day. They set up what's called a blower door test, which is generally it's a big framing cape with a fan that takes the place of your front door, and it actually quantifies how much leakage is in your home. They get a beginning number. That fan really exaggerates the drafts in your house. You can actually feel it while it's on, and they're going to go around during that day and actually make on-the-spot improvements. So they start in your attic. They'll air seal your attic. They'll air seal any opportunities in your basement. They'll caulk windows, weather strip doors, et cetera, and then they'll test out with a blower door. And it's that difference from start to end where they can quantify those energy savings. If your house happens to have ductwork, same deal. We have a test for that as well. It's called a duct blast test, where we quantify the leakage in your duct system, and we seal the ductwork to ensure that the air is getting to where it's supposed to be going. It's not leaking in your attic or in your basement. The last step is, once we do all of that, we'll put together a comprehensive report for you. The technicians will review all of the work done, all of the anticipated energy savings, which generally averages $200 to $300 annually per home. We'll explain all of the rebates that you may qualify for. So while they're up in your attic, they're going to identify your insulation levels and let you know if you would qualify for a rebate, for example. There's also the DOE Home Energy Score, which is another part of the service that if you are open to it, it is optional. We can do that as well and review those findings with you as well. Next slide. So there's a lot of information here on the screen. I'm going to try not to read it all, but what I do want to say is due to COVID and the pandemic, there are enhanced incentive levels right now. The most robust levels I've ever seen. I've been doing this program now for 12 years. So it's a great time to go ahead and take advantage of these services. So for insulation, it's $2.20 per square foot. For your attic space, for your basement garage ceiling space, that's generally going to cover 100% of the cost. The walls, that'll cover most, if not all, of the cost as well. And that's up to $10,000 in incentives per home. Anyone who's had the service done this year currently has until the end of March to get it done. And then anyone who has had HES completed in the last 3 years have until the end of this year to get it done. Windows, there are rebates, $50 for double pane, $100 for triple pane. There are heat pump incentives as well. So it's $500 per ton. For those that may not be too familiar with what a ton is, the average home, just say the average home is 2,000 square feet. You have about 600 square feet per ton that you need to condition your home. So you would need around 2.5, excuse me, yep, 2.5 tons, no, 3.5 tons, sorry, of air. So you can see kind of where that incentive would lie. So there are $500 per tons for those. For those Branford residents that have current electric heat, electric resistance heat, you also, by going through this HES program, get additional $1,000 on top of that 500. So it adds up to $1,500 per ton. Next slide. All right, I wanted to go over the air source heat pump pilot as well. This is new in 2020. It's the first time we have incentives to displace oil in propane heat. So if your home qualifies for the pilot program, there are a few things that we look at, including if the house is tight enough, if you have the insulation levels, or you're upgrading to the levels that you need in order to qualify for the pilot. But again, if you have oil or propane, you may qualify for this, and that's $1,500 per ton as well. There are additional incentives for integrated controls, and it's a max of 2 units per home. Next slide. I believe that is the last slide. So with that, I'll be turning it over to Mike Cohen, HeatSmart coach, who will review the 3rd and 4th steps of the HeatSmart program. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So the 3rd step is heat pumps. And next slide. Heat pumps are like an air conditioner. Heat pumps are an air conditioner that works backwards and warms your home in the wintertime. As we're all familiar with an air conditioner, the heat is absorbed in your home and dispersed outside to the atmosphere. In the wintertime, it's the opposite. The heat is absorbed from the atmosphere and is dispersed inside your home. Next slide. So heat pumps do save money. Heat pumps are on the left, and they're cheaper than oil, cheaper than propane, cheaper than baseboard electric by a great deal. So heat pumps do save money. Next slide. But what is important for me and for a lot of people on the Clean Energy Committee, heat pumps fight global warming. Here's an example that shows that the global warming is here. Sea level rise has caused salt water to go into the streets of Miami on a regular basis. This is Miami at high tide during the full moon. So it's very important for us to take care of global warming while we are saving money on energy. Next slide. So the heat pump, the HeatSmart program is progressing rapidly. As of Thursday, we had 91 leads. We had 42 HES audits completed or scheduled. And the website that we created describes the program, collects lead information, and we track the responses. We have a preferred HES providers of CMC and NACS, and they're the ones who are going to be contacting people and getting you started on the HeatSmart program. So our preferred heat pump installer is Air Incorporated. Next slide. Air Incorporated was chosen because we had a competition among several heat pump installers. They were all invited to give us a statement of their qualifications. We interviewed several of them, and we chose Air Incorporated because they're a Branford business and they have 29 years of experience here in HVAC experience, and they can participate in our extensive community outreach and education program. Next slide. So with heat pumps, you save energy and you save CO2 and greenhouse gases, and heat pumps are more energy saving or more global greenhouse gas saving if they are powered by renewable energy. One way you get renewable energy in your own home is to install a solar panel. Next slide. So rooftop solar panels save money, and they are a hedge against raising utility costs. They decrease fossil fuel dependence, and they reduce pollution, greenhouse gases, and they provide local resilience. If you have solar panels and get a battery that's in your basement, a battery bank, you can go through a power outage without hardly even knowing it's there. They create local jobs and economic growth. In the country today, solar production is a much greater job creator than coal and oil combined. And they will help meet they'll help meet the Connecticut environmental goals. Okay, next slide. So this illustrates how savings grow through time when you install a solar panel. The solar panel's cost of electricity stays the same year after year, up to 20 years. And during that time, you start saving on your utility bill, and the savings go up through time as the utility bill grows. Next slide. So as part of the effort of bringing solar to Branford, we're participating in the SolSmart program. SolSmart is a national designation and technical assistance program that helps local governments facilitate residential and business solar energy. And right now, we are approaching getting our bronze certification under this program, and we hope to go to silver and then maybe to gold. Next slide. So how can you get started with heat pumps, with the HeatSmart program? Well, you go to HeatSmartBranfordConnecticut.org. That's HeatSmartBranfordConnecticut.org. You fill out the I'm interested form, and we're going to give you a call and get you started saving energy and helping to save the planet. You can also call 203-815-1377 and make sure you mention HeatSmart. And we'll also get started on the program that way. So now I'd like to turn the program over to Bob Babcock, who will wrap up the HeatSmart program. Bob?
Thank you very much, Mike. Let me try and summarize a little bit. We've talked about the HES program by Joe Roy. Then we had the HeatSmart and the SolSmart program by Mike Cohen. And the way I would like to summarize it is really two reasons for this presentation. One, first, is the cost savings of energy. And secondly, to reduce the carbon footprint. Or depending upon where your mindset is, number one can be number two, and number two can be number one. But the program in and of itself accomplishes both of those distinguishes. So to get a little bit specific, I'll tell you about my wife and my story. We had an HES audit, and just the day that they were here for the whole day, just by the caulking they did and the bulbs that they changed out, we were told that we probably saved $250 that day by the work that they had done by their on-spot improvements. They put in about 25 bulbs, and for some reason our bathroom was always cold, and our bedroom just off that was always cold. They sealed up that area, and oddly enough, right now our bedroom and bathroom are far more comfortable just by the sealing up that they did that day. But the interesting part too is that while the team was here, they brought up that there's a program that is offered, and it is called, it works with our duct work. And they brought up that it would be a good idea for us to look into it. And what they do on a future date is to come in and they would literally pressurize our duct work. And from that, they would put a product in the ductwork, and that ductwork product would then seal the holes in our ductwork. And I said, well, that sounds like a great idea. How much will it cost? And they said, well, that program will cost roughly $2,000 because of the amount of holes that you have that we've determined in your ductwork. but through this program, that $2,000 will be paid for by the program. So needless to say, my wife and I took them up on their offer. We had them come over on a later date. They did that. They did a test, and initially we had a loss of 450 cubic feet per minute in our ductwork. And when they finished, we had a loss of 5 cubic feet per minute from the ductwork. And this was all free to us. The second recommendation that they brought up was, after looking at our attic, they said that we should have some additional insulation put in our attic. So a person came over, they gave us a quote. It was $3,240. And I said, boy, I didn't think it would cost that much. And they said, well, that's all covered by the program. Okay, so if you add up $2,000, $3,200, and the $250 that just the on-spot improvements took, that's over $5,200. And my wife and I did not spend any money on any of that. We're also looking into a heat pump, but just in and of itself, the $5,200, we feel rather fortunate to have that, that savings. Not to mention the work that they have done, the fuel savings that we will gain by having a far more efficient home and more efficient ductwork. But again, as what was brought up, I strongly recommend that you go to the website of HeatSmartConnecticut.org and get some additional information. And the program is very, very worthwhile. Next slide. Okay, now, this is how we can help you. Now, how can you help us? One of our board members or members of the committee got in touch with an organization through Sustainability Connecticut. They have a matching grant. And the way that matching grant works is that if we raise $5,000, we will get an additional $5,000 from this patronicity.com. And I strongly recommend, if you would, or ask, make a request, if you go up onto patronicity.com and search for the Branford Clean Energy Campaign, you will see the opportunity to make a donation, and that will help us do additional marketing and help us to do a better job within our own community of Branford. Okay, thank you. And now I would like to introduce the next presenter, which is Elena Cahill, an evolution of the energy landscape. Go ahead, Elena.
Thank you, Bob. Hi, everybody. This is going to be a conversation about some of the direction that I think we see energy conservation, energy efficiency, and energy generation going in the future. Next slide, please, Dan. We talked a little bit about the team, the Branford Clean Energy Committee, why they originated, where they've been able to go in such a short time, which is so impressive how much they've been able to do. And now we'll talk a little bit about the future. Next slide, please. You know, and why are we doing this? But we've heard this is redundant at this point, but I do want to bring it up again. We want cleaner air. We want energy available for all communities. We want reliable energy and an everlasting supply, because we know that fossil fuels are finite and preferably at a lower cost. Next slide, please. So just some really quick definitions. This is probably everyone would know these, but I just want to quickly go over them. Adopting technology which requires less energy is energy efficiency. And that is what you're seeing change so rapidly, which is the new technology coming out. And we can replace pretty much anything in both our home or our business with a newer version that would likely be more energy efficient. So a simple example would be the CFL bulb to an LED, but it really applies to your appliances if you're home. It would apply to your mechanical systems when you're home. We can keep going. Energy conservation is along the same lines, but different in the sense where it's saying just use less of a resource. And I like this because I think behavioral changes is something to be discussed, because we have to, one, I guess, get our heads around the idea of sustainability, not just hearing buzzwords in the media, but how it directly can be applied in our day-to-day lives. And some of the applications are very simple. They don't require us doing anything besides a behavioral change. Some of them will require some type of a technology to help us conserve energy. But I'm gonna just try to hit home with the behavioral patterns, because I think that we don't often think about what we could do without replacing anything, either in our business or in our home, that would actually save us and save energy as a whole. And I'm going to do a very quick commercial industrial application. If you go into your business or your office or a manufacturing facility and you turn on everything at one time, that draws more power and puts a bigger burden on our grid than if you actually stagger starts. So without changing anything, if you just changed your behavior, you can conserve energy. And at home, most of what we think about, I mean, the HES audit for sure is really important for identifying opportunities, but then also just thinking about behavioral changes that we can make. And there's monetary incentives. If you're actually paying for anything, there's monetary incentives for both efficiency and conservation. I heard, let's see here, Joe talk earlier about the Energy Efficiency Fund. The Energy Efficiency Fund is money that all of us as ratepayers pay in if you live in a non-municipal town. And that money is available to come back to you to make changes both residentially and commercially. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So a little bit about the future, which is really what I want to talk about, and changes that I think we'll see going forward. I think we're going to see the building codes change. They've been changing, and in typical fashion of the United States, I often say United States is a pretty complex regulatory environment because of our, municipal level, state level, federal level. And one of the considerations is that building codes are not uniform throughout the country. But there is certainly progress being made to change the building codes. If we change the building codes, then everything moving forward will automatically be more sustainable. But there is a process that's involved, and there are different websites that you can go to view and be vocal about. One of them, it's just one example, is the International Energy Conservation Code. But there are every locale in the country, both commercial and residential, has to file building codes. And if we change the building codes, fundamentally, we change what happens going forward. And I think in the future, you're going to see more of this happening, or quicker. I mean, building codes have always evolved, but I do think that there is an environment around the building codes that's trying to get the country as a whole to systemize, and also trying to be more progressive in terms of energy. The second part of the future are actual ordinances or laws that are put in place in order to help people at least understand what their energy consumption is. And then some laws actually go further and mandate that you reduce your carbon output. The next slide, I don't want to jump to it yet, though we'll talk about what that looks like. But I think it's also something in the future, the evolution of what you're going to see with energy is that there will be more accountability, and people will have to understand what their carbon output is, and then also try to reduce their carbon output. So the Institute for Market Transformation, US MAP, is next. But then let's just talk about the future with transportation. And one of the gentlemen on the committee sent out a great article this morning on hydrogen. But I think you will see a change in transportation off of fossil fuels, both to electrifying and hydrogen. So I think we'll see in the future more of that, but I think you hear about it all the time. There has been a dramatic increase in the production of these vehicles. If you were to look at a map and see the production of these vehicles versus 5 years ago versus 10 years ago, it's been a dramatic increase. And then energy creation, there's many, many ways to create energy. And I totally believe in solar and wind, and we know geothermal and waste or biomass, hydro and tidal. And I think what we're going to start seeing in the future is not just words that are buzzwords, but more localized applications. And there's a lot of benefit to localized application, because in Branford, I feel very privileged. I live in Branford. I live in a community that I have the resources always available to me. But in many parts of the world, we don't have resources available. And certainly they don't have energy, and they may not have water. And by learning how to create energy from many different resources that are probably in those communities will help them of course, then have water. And if they have water, they can start growing a sustainable community for themselves. So the future, I think, will be energy creation, both for all the reasons that we've been talking about, but also because I think the adaptation will come in more in countries where energy is not nearly as available and or reliable, which I think is really exciting. Next slide, please. This is the map I was speaking of earlier. So what you don't see on this map is any ordinances in the state of Connecticut, but what you do see are ordinances applied in other parts of the country. I don't think it'll be long before this will change in Connecticut and throughout the country. And the colors mean different things. It's the requirement. So some are commercial buildings, some are residential buildings, some are multifamily buildings. Some require a benchmark and some require a benchmark plus a reduction. And I just wanted to bring this forward at this event because sometimes we know this and sometimes we don't know this. If we live and work in Connecticut, you probably wouldn't have had any reason to be exposed to these laws. But you know, when I first started following this, and this map updates continually, there was one dot on the map, and I can tell you that in short order, this map keeps growing. So I do think in the future, there is also, and I'll tie this into real estate, there's a tremendous amount of research that's been done over the last 5 years, correlating the value of real estate to the carbon output of the real estate. So the lower the carbon output, the higher the value of the real estate, both in the commercial world and the residential world. So I think that we're going to continue to see this. You know, I think we're going to see policy changes. I think we're going to see the adaptation of ordinances, requiring that people become aware of their carbon output, and then in some instances also lowering that carbon output by mandate. And I think it goes back to, can we, next slide please, Dan? So one last piece I'm going to talk about is storage in the future. So I think we're going to see building codes changing at a quicker pace. I think we're going to see more ordinances and laws and storage in the future. Now, I could probably come up with 25 more things, but I want to keep this kind of quick for today's purpose. Storage in the future. So storing energy. We just talked about making energy, and I do think we'll be making energy, but energy has to be used immediately unless you have a storage device. And historically, the storage devices have been primarily batteries, and batteries also take natural resources. So there's a little bit of a loop there, and they are coming up with ways to store energy in non-battery oriented, as in natural resource oriented facilities. That will, I think, be very dramatic for the change of the future. And then something that ties into talking about the heat pump campaign, you can store energy in less invasive ways on the planet by storing it in heat exchangers, compressors, and turbines. So oftentimes we think about, you know, a battery system that's being provided energy from a solar, possibly, or just regular electricity from the grid, stores energy in the battery. You deploy the battery as needed. If it's transportation, is when you're driving. If it's for your home, is hopefully to use during peak hours. If not, you might be using it if there's been a power outage. But, and we can, I think it's pretty simple to understand how that works, but sometimes we don't think about storing energy by converting the energy into a form that is simpler or less expensive or easier to maintain or easier to store, and then converting it back again. So again, this conversation is really about the future. I think that's what we're going to learn more about, is how we can take energy that we make and store it not always in a vehicle that took another natural resource to create. Electric cars, we're talking about electric cars. There's more electric cars being produced every day. The numbers are going up dramatically. The batteries in electric cars are also storage devices. We don't often think about them that way. And then we can get into further technology, but I think I'm running over time. So this is just a little bit, like I said, there's a lot of topics in the future, but I just wanted to touch on a couple. And I thank everyone for being here today. Thank you, Dan. Questions?
So thank you, everyone who's presented today. Before we go to the chat, Elena, could you give a little bit more examples of the most promising storage technologies? I've heard ideas such as storing heat in large water vats or pumping water up up to a reservoir and then letting it run a turbine, during the night and things like that. What do you see as the most practical or the most, what's coming over the horizon in the near
Wow. So there's a battery storage system that's coming that will not require, I think I'm probably just fixated on this because I'm so excited about it, but it's not going to require the lithium that you see today, which is problematic for the planet. So from my vantage point, I would love to see a battery that we can be using both at home and for transportation, but not using lithium or the natural resources that we're seeing today. The other part, which is not necessarily storage, but it's a creation, which I also like, which then creates heat, is waste. Another one of my favorite examples. In Connecticut, we've had Covidian. Covidian's been a company here taking garbage and burning it and making energy and feeding that energy back into the grid. But what they do in a few areas is they take the garbage, they burn it, they make energy, and they make steam, and that steam loops. And by looping the steam, which they have in Hartford, a big steam loop, you are able to provide energy sources. Now you've taken garbage and you've made an energy source in steam. And that steam goes through the pipes and it temperates depending on the facility that needs it. So in terms of storage facilities itself, having a battery that doesn't require lithium or nickel would really make me the happiest. And I think that's coming. I think that's down the horizon. Also, this is just a separate side note. Did anyone else happen to notice on the news that the first loop ran its first test with humans in it? Did anybody see that yet? Just happened this weekend, actually. So there's a lot of opportunity. There's going to be a lot of changes in technology. We spoke earlier about how quickly technology is changing. And from my vantage point, what I would like to see the most, even though I think what you're speaking of is all going to happen with water, with hydro, with turbines, but I would like to see us have batteries that don't require the natural resources they require today. And I do think that's coming down the pike.
Thank you. Again, if anybody has questions, they should enter them into the chat. We have one question. I think this might be for Jamie or Shirley, and that is that they're asking about ways that the Branford Land Trust can contribute to decisions on power generation or ideas such as community power. So can you comment on that?
Are you talking
Yeah.
about carbon sequestration with the trees or the amount of land they have? Where I'm not sure what the question
Well, I think
is.
it's an open question. So how can the Branford Land Trust contribute to the energy portfolio?
Well, the one comment I would have, or even just things to be considered. I know in one of the slide, one of our accomplishments was the large solar array. And where I do think that is a successful project, or it is a successful project for the town and an accomplishment. And there is opportunity to pursue more of that. I think we also need to be mindful of where we actually develop those solar arrays and not to degrade the soils and the environmental impact that ecosystem may be having, right? So, things like a former landfill is appropriate. Where we built ours, though it looked like a lot of green around it, that was a former gravel pit. I think there's, perhaps they could play a part in terms of evaluating if a municipality is going to, the town is going to move forward with another such large project like that we understand the impact that it may have on the ecosystem. And if it's, you want to make sure you're achieving the benefit of the clean energy production, but you don't want to do it to a detriment of other, the environment that's around that area.
Yeah, I'll second that. Matter of fact, the Clean Energy Commission just discussed how we feel about a solar farm going into an area that's like forest. And we don't really support that. There are other places whether it's carports, ground mount in a place like a field is okay, but we don't want ecosystems destroyed. We completely agree with Jamie.
And if, Dan, if I could just also, one comment, Elena's, follow up on Elena's comment regarding, and actually the company I believe she was referring to is Covanta, that is, operates the trash to energy facility, which just Branford is actually a part of the Bristol Resource. Well, now it used to be the Resource Recovery Policy Board. It used to be the Bristol Resource Recovery Operating Committee, which the town of Branford was one of the 14 towns that did, help fund the facility in Bristol, where, it may be counterintuitive to think that burning things is environmentally the best thing. However, as I said, technology changes. We have to evaluate everything. There's always going to be a transition. And I do think when you look at that type of operation, because what else do we do with our municipal solid waste? It would be landfilled or trucked across the country and landfilled. And what's the impact to the environment on doing that? So I do think that's something that, just wanted the group to be aware of, that we do participate in. Thank you.
Dan, this is Bill Horn. I could comment on a couple of these things. As many of you know, I've been active with the Land Trust for about 25 years. The Land Trust owns some properties that have fields on them. And you might think that we could put solar panels there, but in several of those cases, we have a local farmer who's actually cutting hay on those properties. So you have to balance as Jamie said, you sort of have to balance all the benefits of a particular property. In the case of those fields, it would be unlikely that we would agree to put solar panels on it if it was going to impact on the ability of the dairy farmer to harvest the hay that's grown there. And then related to what Jamie just said in terms of, and Elena, about energy from our household waste, there are, probably 40 or so people in Branford now who are subscribing to a service where Blue Earth Compost comes around once a week and picks up our food waste, our food scraps. And they're transported to Southington, which is not quite as far as Bristol. And the material is put into an anaerobic digester. The company describes it as a large stainless steel stomach, where bacteria and other microbes generate methane, which is used on site to generate electricity. So that's another option. I think that one of the downsides of the way most municipalities handle their waste these days is that everything goes into one can and off it goes to the resource recovery. But that's not necessarily the most efficient way to recover the energy that's in there. If you can get the wet food and stuff out, the incineration will be more efficient, and you can also get methane at the anaerobic digestion facility. So these are things that we're currently working on. And if people are interested in this thing about the anaerobic digestion of your food scraps, you can go to look for Blue Earth Compost on the web, and there's a place that you can find out about the program and you can sign up for it if you want.
There was a question about COVID safety measures during the HES visit. Joe, could you address that, please?
Sure, yeah. I think that's a great question. So we follow all regulations and protocols put forth by CDC, by the state of Connecticut and DEEP, and the utilities as well. The utilities did hire a third-party consultant to look at COVID in the best way for our guys to be safe. We do it all. We disinfect when we get there. They're wearing proper masks and gloves and protective gear. throughout the entire assessment. And then we also disinfect on the way out once again.
We also have a question about heat pumps, and I'll take this opportunity to introduce Wayne Krasnow, who's the president of Air Inc. And maybe you can unmute yourself, Wayne. The question was, do I have to get rid of my furnace if I get a heat pump, or can they coexist? So how does the heat pump fit into the existing energy profile of the home?
We recommend that you do keep your furnace for a secondary heat source. Ductless is not really made for the primary heat source unless the house is extremely well insulated or had the HES and passed with flying colors. But no manufacturer really recommends using the heat pump as the primary heat source. Now, saying that, you can run these heat pumps now down to minus 13 degrees and still run fairly efficient. So you may never end up using your primary source, but they recommend that you have it there.
Thank you, Wayne. One technology, so-called technology, that's gotten a lot of interest or billing lately is carbon sequestration or carbon capture. And as from my simple understanding, there are two ways you can capture carbon. One is by planting a lot of trees, and the other way is through active technology where there's an energy dependent process to pull the carbon out of the air. Either Shirley or Elena, can you comment on the role those technologies will play in addressing the abundance of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere?
Shirley, you want to go ahead?
Shirley, you're muted.
Patrick Sweeney and I just met with Jamie, following up on his idea to calculate how much carbon is sequestered by all the trees that the town plants. And this year, the Department of Public Works planted 55 trees, and we calculated that there was a tremendous amount of carbon that will be sequestered when the trees reach maturity. I forgot how many hundreds of thousands of vehicles it's equivalent coming off the road, but certainly that's happening. As far as carbon capture techniques, I think Elena's going to know a lot more about it than me, but I know Bill Gates is putting a ton of money into it.
Elena, do you want to tell us how soon carbon capture will be practical and economical?
Practical and economical. So I'm hesitant a little bit because I think that definition is going to be answered differently. But I will say, I'm trying to recall the date. Bill Gates is actually doing a presentation on this in a podcast for the first time coming up in about 2 weeks. And I'm going to try to find that date before we exit. And then maybe you can listen directly to his story. I don't know how many people actually follow Bill Gates, but the amount of research he does in anything he's interested in is incredible. And it's funny that you actually brought that conversation up because he's doing a conversation on it for the first time. So while you're continuing with questions, I'm going to research that and put it in the chat.
I have to say that Bill Gates will not be appearing at the Branford Forum, but it'll be another venue. Okay, Kate Galambos has a question. Would you like to unmute yourself and ask it, please?
Yeah, thank you very much. I have a couple of questions on the HES audit. One is, I have friends who live in another town, Burlington, Connecticut. Can they get the HES audit?
Joe, can you answer that?
You're on mute.
There it is. Yes, so that program is open statewide in just about every town, with the exception of the municipalities. that have their own electricity. I'll use Wallingford as an example. CMC is a vendor for Wallingford as well, so we can do that town. But there are a couple towns around the state, South Norwalk, Groton, that may have their own programs. But yes, that the service is available statewide.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Another question I have is, as you have described this audit, and I'm signed up to get it in a couple weeks. I'm so impressed with how many services are provided. I want to tell more people about it. Is the best way to do that to have them go to the Branford HeatSmart website, or to call the energy company directly? What's the best way for people to get signed up?
I'd say if they're a Branford resident, I think the best way would be through the Branford website. If they live in a different town, it depends. Sometimes the service provider you're using may have a referral program set up. If not, you can just call 1-800-WISE-USE. That'll go directly to the utility company, who can put them in touch with a provider.
Wise use?
Yep, 1-800-WISE-USE.
Okay, so for the HeatSmart, Mr. Cohen, if somebody signs up with the I am interested button, do they get automatically referred for the HES audit through that action?
Yes.
Okay.
If you go to HeatSmart and HeatSmartBranfordCT.org and fill out the I'm interested form, you will get a call
Uh-huh.
from one of our HES auditors, and they'll schedule you for an HES audit.
Okay, that's great. And then I have one last question. People may ask me, it sounds great that I'm going to get all these services more or less free of charge, but where does the funding come from for this? For the
Sure. So it actually comes from a few sources, but the main source really is, if you were to look at your Eversource or your UI bill, whether you have electric or even gas through SCG, or there is something called the combined public benefits charge. So essentially, we're all charged on our bills, and that goes into the energy efficiency fund that the utilities administer. There are a couple other funding sources, but that is primarily it.
Okay. Well, thank you. And I just wanted to mention to Mr. Krasnow, I'm so glad that HeatSmart chose Air Inc., because I've used their services in the past, and they're a very, very good company. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much for your questions. I should mention that the HeatSmart BranfordCT.org is, of course, the portal to get started in the whole process. But there's also a lot of other stuff on the website. There's information about heat pumps. There's information about solar, and there's information. There are links to the town sustainability resources as well. So if you get on the website, snoop around a little bit, I think you'll find there's a lot of interesting stuff related to home energy. So let's see, there was one note here. The correct number is 877 WISE use, not 800 WISE use. 877 WISE-USE. So I think we're sort of approaching the end here. I'd like to thank everybody who came, and especially our speakers and First Selectman Jamie Cosgrove. I think it's been an extremely informative session, and we hope to reschedule. Well, first of all, we hope the best of health to Charlotte Dianello, and we hope to reschedule her in the spring. So thank you, everyone, and have a nice day. Tune into the Masters. I think it might be almost over, but you can catch the 70-second hole if you hurry. Goodbye, everyone. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Dan.